I am Sister Joanna Kristna, 3 years in the Carmelite convent. That apart, I am from the Ukraine. Sister Anastasia of the Life-Giving Cross. I am from Slovakia. I entered the Carmelite convent in 2004. My name is Sister Teresa of Christ Emmanuel and the Holy Countenance. I entered the Carmelite convent 57 years ago. My name is Maria Elizabeth of the Most Holy Trinity. I was born in Slovakia. God called me 3 years ago. My name is Veronica of Christ the King and His Most Holy Countenance. I am from Slovakia. I entered the Carmelite convent 10 years ago. I am Sister Teresa of St. Joseph. I've been a Carmelite for 69 years. Sister Maria Teresa of the Most Holy Eucharist. I've been a Carmelite for 19 years. I was born in Bulgaria. The Carmel of the Holy Spirit was founded on May the 24th, 1935, at the request and insistence of the former Catholic Bishop of the Eastern Rite, Bishop Kirill Kurtev, together with Archbishop Roncalli. It was indeed an innovative initiative, the first Carmelite convent of the Eastern Rite. It was set up with a clear intention that the sisters should pray for the unity of the churches.
The Carmel in Sofia, founded by sisters from Constantinople, was the first Carmel of the Eastern Rite anywhere in the world. The sisters soon took up residence at the former home of Archbishop Roncalli, the Pope's legate in Bulgaria, and later Pope John XXIII. After the Second World War and the coming to power of the Communists, all Carmelites of foreign origin were forced to leave Bulgaria, and in 1952, sisters of Bulgarian origin were also thrown out of the convent.
I made my pledge. In other words, I took my final vows in 1952, precisely on July 16th, the day Bishop Vasilkov, 3 Assumptionists, and nearly all our priests were arrested. We were arrested exactly on St. Ivan Rilsky's feast day, October 19th, 1952. It was still morning when they came, and they didn't even wait for us to open the door. They demolished it, entered and said, they had pistols, "You're under arrest." In addition, they immediately separated us, one from the other.
Some of them, Sister Błażena and one other sister, were in Belene, in a work camp. The remaining sisters were all persecuted and had court cases brought against them. Some were imprisoned for 40, 50 days. It varied.
Un jour, il m'a dit, voyons,
One day an investigator told me, "What bad things did you do that you have to go to confession? You lived in seclusion, with no contact with the outside world. What sin could you have committed that you have to go to confession?" I answered, "One does not always commit big sins. Sometimes one doesn't live by the rule. For example, one doesn't observe the silence rule, or such minor things." He replied, "Oh yes, therefore you could say that you always abide by the rule, that you never violate it. Can you say that you have always been obedient to the rule?" It was then that I felt that something was invading my conscience, a feeling of guilt, a feeling of sadness, because who can say about themselves that they have always behaved beyond reproach? I instinctively looked up at him and saw his terrible, penetrating gaze. I felt as if something had broken into me. Then I immediately calmed down and said, "That is not your business." At that moment, I felt that he had lost his influence over me. It was, nonetheless, a startling experience. I understood how they were able to creep into people's consciences. That was how they were able to impose whatever they wanted in order to provoke a feeling of guilt, even though the person was innocent.
C'est qu'ils veulent pour qu'ils se trouvent coupables sans être coupables.
We were very frightened, very. As women, will they behave honourably towards us? That made matters worse. Some of our sisters, for example Sister Boagena and Sister of the Incarnation, were put in a cell with other women. I was the only one to be left alone, and if you take into account the fact that I wasn't interrogated for 10 days, you can begin to imagine the continuous worry and uncertainty that I went through. They finally began interrogating me, always at night. Exactly the moment one was preparing to turn in for the night, they would bang the iron door that undoubtedly weighed a ton. They would bang the door and say, "Get up, you are not going to turn in for the night." I would be led, with one militia man in front and one behind, along various staircases and endless corridors, up and down the higher floors. The hours were long, and the questions always the same. "Why are you here? What have you done?" I would answer, "You tell me. I have done nothing wrong, committed no crime against the state, or the people, or against my conscience. You tell me why you have brought me here."
Nous n'avions ni chapelet, du pain, j'avais fait un chapelet bracelet.
We had no rosaries, so I made one from bread, in the shape of a ring. From yet another little piece of bread, I made a small figurine and said to myself that this was Our Lady. I took her with me to the interrogation, seeking help from her presence. I would hold her tightly in my hand, in readiness to pray for help in case of need. My interrogator noticed that I had something in my hand and said, "Open your hand." When I did so, he said, "Open both your hands." He saw that I had something. "What is it?" I answered, "A small figurine. Let me have it." Do you know what he then said? "Does this give you strength?" He felt a power that he wanted to discover. He took it from me and placed it on the table. He felt the grace that flowed from it. They later released me, threatening that I must renounce the cloth, because I had been arrested in a habit, that I should go home, forget everything, and that I should have nothing to do with any Catholic or any nun.
Following their release from prison, the sisters remained scattered for several years. All convents originating from outside Bulgaria were forbidden to function. All the church's property was confiscated within 24 hours, in accordance with Decree 88 from 1953. Rectories, convents, schools, hospitals, leaving only church buildings with a 2-metre strip of land beyond the walls. In 1957, Bishop Kurtev concluded, together with Mother Boazena, that the only place from which the communists could not throw the sisters out was the then closed, though not confiscated, Church of the Carmelite Fathers.
We will now look at the cells where our Carmelite sisters lived. Teresa was the first sister to come here. She lived here with her father to begin with. The sister cooked over here. The bed was over here. Everything fitted into this little room.
Ето, тук сестрите имаха своя стая.
The sisters had their tiny recreation room over here, which also served as the chapter house.
Своите манастирски капитули. Тук имаха пейки.
The pews were over here. They also had a little table.
Тук вижда се.
You can see the church from here. Their whole lives revolved around the church. There is one part upstairs where the sisters created 2 more cells. They built towards the end of their stay where there wasn't enough space. For the sisters who later arrived from Croatia to help, as well as for the young sisters from Slovakia who lived there.
Също и младите сестри, когато дойдоха от Словакия.
Вода имахме в сакристията, т.е. там, където са църковните неща, винаги...
We had water in the sacristy. There was always a small wash basin there, because when a priest used to come in the past, he would need to wash his hands. We built a toilet outside. One had to go outside the church at all times of the day, so you can imagine the problems. In spite of everything, everyone had a small cell in which to live. As much as 1 bed, 1 table, 1 small cupboard, and that was that.
At first, in the church on Asen's Złatarova Street, there were the 5 sisters who managed to stay in Bulgaria. With time, only women registered in Sofia could obtain a permit to live in the convent, which in effect eliminated most new callings.
We had a certain very pleasant candidate from the village of Bewoza, who was sent home by the militia. The poor thing cried a lot. One of our sisters, who had no right to live in Sofia, attracted the militia, who came, checked her out, arrested and sent her back home. This happened several times. She belonged to the convent, so she would come back, but had to remain in hiding. When the militia came, she would dress in civilian dress and leave by a back door. There were comic situations. One day, when there was no way of getting her outside, the sisters laid her under some unused mattresses in the choir. At one point, she began to suffocate and stuck her head out and asked, "Have they gone?" "No, be silent, hush," they whispered. The story seems funny today, but when it was for real, it definitely wasn't so funny. But God knows. He also has a sense of humour, like us.
Но Господ знае също има чувство за хумор, както и нас.
We managed to exist thanks to the foreign language lessons we ran. The sisters that knew French very well taught French, whilst those who knew another would teach another. There were people who sympathised with us and would at times bring things, for example food. We lived with hope. I would sink into despair, but then I would, in spite of everything, retain my faith in God. We all had it. I entered the Carmelites in 1988, just before the regime collapsed. When I felt that God was truly calling me to this life, there was no doubt in my mind about whether the conditions I was going to live under were to be comfortable or not. I simply knew that I wanted to join, and from that moment on, I was in God's hands, and that He would lead me. I became even more strongly aware of how very, very wonderful this was, and that one could live under such conditions, in such poverty as Jesus lived. It was something that bound us ever more closely to Him.
Young nuns entering the Carmelite order were aware that they would spend the rest of their lives in a convent located in a church choir. It was difficult at the time to imagine that communism would fall in their lifetime.
I will quite openly say that there was no great hope. His Eminence Kurtev persuaded me to prepare myself to go abroad and so fulfill my calling elsewhere. I began. They, the communists, disagreed. I even asked them to let me go to Poland. Yes, exactly, to Poland, because it was in our bloc, our socialist bloc, right? Despite that, they continued to insist that I would never set foot outside Bulgaria for as long as they were here.
The life of the Carmelite sisters was singularly linked with the fate of another Greek Catholic order, that of the Eucharistine Sisters.
I am Sister Salvatore. I've been a member of the order for 55 years. My name is Sister Ekaterina. I've been a member for 60 years. Sister Michaela. I've been a nun for 60 years. Sister Sandra. I've been in the convent for 2 years. Sister Christina. I've been a nun for 70 years. I am Sister Cecilia. I've been a member of the order 63 years. Sister Agnesa. I've been a member for 42 years. Sister Eleanor. I've been here for a year and a half. Sister Theodosia. In the order for 67 years. Sister Rosalia. In the order for 63 years. Sister Natalia. I've been a member of the order for 51 years. I'm Sister Anna. I've been a member of the order of the Eucharistine Sisters for 7 years. Valentina Kristova. I am 83 years old, in the order for 55 years. I am Sister Maximiliana. I've been a member of the order for 28 years. I was 28 years old when I joined, and I have been here for 28 years. The sisters came here during the Balkan conflict as a consequence, like all refugees, of being chased out of Macedonia's present borders. Together with some of the children who were at the time at the orphanage in Strumica. To begin with, they had nowhere to stay, and so ended up living in luggage carriages at Sofia's railway station. The construction of this house on Pirotska Street began in the 1930s. We have fought to this day without effect in an effort to get the building returned. This was the sisters' first general house and included an orphanage in which there were 100 children by 1948. Our particular charisma, linked to the Eucharist, is the care of the altar, divine service, educating children, and preparing them for their first Holy Communion, or as our founder put it, in the service of Jesus, the poor and abandoned, in people's souls and in the churches. Our monastic order was founded by a blood brother and sister, Italians from the Piedmont, Turin area, Father Joseph Aloati, a Lazarist, and Sister Eurosia Aloati, the first Eucharistine. We were founded in Solon in 1889.
With the coming to power of the communists, the Eucharistine Sisters were increasingly oppressed. In 1948, the authorities confiscated the orphanage run by the nuns, forcing them to move to one very small part of the building, whilst the new masters incited the children to turn against the sisters. Finally, in 1961, the sisters were forced to leave their house altogether.
Our beautiful chapel that I remember as a child was converted into a sports gym, whilst the convent building ceased to have anything to do with its intended use. The sisters were forced to move into a house that was very small in relation to their needs, into the house of Pope Roncalli, the first house he bought on arriving here as papal legate.
Тука дойдоха сестрите кармелитки.
The Carmelite sisters came here in 1935, and they lived here until they were chased out and dispersed. It was then, having lost their property in the orphanage, that all the Eucharistine sisters had to move into this house. Seeing the house is in a very bad state, there is presently a renovation in progress, a very big one, to save a house that was in a very bad state of repair.
The old, the young and the ill were all moved there. We had to carry everything that had accumulated over the years on our backs and take it with us into this small, three-roomed house. The damp was everywhere. We had nowhere to fit our baggage, the sisters and the beds. Everything was together in one pile, outside in the yard. We only laid a mattress on the floor, a couple of sisters in each room, and that's how we lay. There were over 30 sisters. They had to sleep in hammocks, on tables that then had to be cleared for use the following day, or on the floor. There was no kitchen, no normal rooms, absolutely nothing. God helped us. So step by step we were soon back on our feet, and having got ourselves organised, we proceeded to carry out essential repairs, as far as we were able, though getting rid of the damp was difficult. But there was one thing that we noticed at the time that was present in the hearts of all the sisters, and that was in spite of everything, in spite of the pain that we all felt, we were happy and full of joy that God was testing us in this way. One of the sisters, a serious type, was even pleased that she was going to travel in a lorry. We were distracted. We laughed, which helped us conquer everything that awaited us.
The sisters were subject to continuous interrogations and searches. Some of them, not unlike the Carmelites, awaited prison sentences. One of the sisters, the late Sister Serafina Angelsheva, who after completing French philology used to teach ambassadors' children, was sentenced to 6 years in prison following the 1952 trial.
We visited her in prison. We also visited priests and we brought them food. They kept silent about many things, except that we should pray. In 1968, the communists gradually began releasing priests from prison, who, despite their exhaustion, immediately took up their parish duties. There were moments when we were totally aware that we were being continuously controlled, continuously observed as to what was happening, who came to see us. The wall plaster was falling away in the corner behind the door. We wanted to repair this. When we began uncovering the old layers, we uncovered a microphone that had been glued to the layers. And then it transpired that there was a whole network of microphones hidden under the plasterwork in several places, in various rooms. This had clearly all been prepared before our arrival. Who knows what they expected, what they were counting on, what they thought they would find. The following day, a firefighter came to check the whole house. We also suspected that the rooms in the roof space opposite were also occupied by special agents. As it turned out, they were, following the installation of big antennas on the roof. All contact with people, especially with children and families, was impossible. Absolute control and a ban on similar activities was the rule of the day. That was when the sisters began homeworking activities to survive, knitting, embroidering, and so passed successive years. We somehow aimed to serve the lonely, the ill and the elderly. We always dressed as lay people, which allowed us to intermingle and enter many homes and apartments where none knew who we were. They were often on our tails, but we were no longer afraid. There was, of course, a price to be paid, as we were often summoned by the security services, suffered threats and other such things, all in an effort at finding means of keeping us away from the people. In spite of everything, that contact was never broken. The sisters also worked in hospitals, where both doctors and patients valued our work very highly. I don't know how we were allowed to be there, apart from the fact that we were obliged to come as lay staff. That didn't worry us, because the essence of a nun is not form, but the spirit. We were happy that we could bear witness to God, Christ, and that we had an advantage in that in comparison with all the other orders, we could live together, wear our habits, because we were accepted as a Bulgarian order. And truly, every outing in our habit was for us an opportunity to bear witness. Perhaps our look irritated some people. There were moments like that. But the sisters used to say that on meeting them, people would occasionally kiss their small crosses, or simply thank them for their prayers, or ask them to intercede in personal intentions. It was an act of tremendous courage and support for the sisters. God gave us the strength to overcome this great difficulty, and we organised very beautiful and joyous outings in order to add variety to the sisters' lives. We often organised outings to Mount Vitosha, as well as other places. We always tried not to show our despondence, despair, bitterness, because we felt that God was with us, that this was a great test for our order, and that is how we all survived.
With the fall of communism in Bulgaria after 1990, the Catholic Church could also return to a normal existence, as well as claim the return of confiscated property. Sofia's Carmelite sisters continued to live in the church choir for a couple more years, whilst the Eucharistine Sisters, crowded in their small house attached to the church, could contemplate beginning to practice their faith openly as well as share it with others.
Живяхме 36 години заедно.
36 of us lived together, Carmelite sisters and Eucharistine sisters. We lived together as a sisterhood. We carried the cross that God had sent us together. Of course, as soon as it became possible for the convent to own something officially and legally, we began looking for land to build a new convent. For it became clear that the continued existence of the Carmelites in the church choir could no longer be sustained. Our sisters from Switzerland, with whom we are very close, helped us greatly in buying this site and later with building the convent. Other convents also helped us, as well as many charitable organisations and benefactors. One of the organisations to which we are very indebted is Aid to the Church in Need. One of our most pressing plans is to build a church as soon as that becomes possible, especially as there is presently no church, except for a chapel adapted to the convent's needs. There is no church, but we don't complain as there are so few of us, and after what we have been through, it seems like a royal palace.
At the beginning of the 1990s, the Eucharistine Sisters also applied themselves to reclaiming their old home at Pirotska Street, mainly to set up a home for lonely mothers as well as create a centre for handicapped children. Alas, reclaiming the building has to date proved impossible. According to the Bulgarian courts, the present Eucharistine Sisters are not the legal successors of the sisters who were driven out in the 1960s. The ruling forced the sisters to build the new convent together with the boarding school for girls in a different place.
The church needed its buildings to help it renew its mission, and thanks to the contacts we managed to establish during one of the visits of Aid to the Church in Need, representatives from Germany, we finally managed to begin rebuilding our convent. Building works were completed in 1998. By then we already had the first children who lived with us, and I would say that the move was for them a tremendous joy, whilst we, more than anything, experienced anxiety, because the move was carried out in winter. The sisters were somewhat frightened because the distances they had to walk, for example to reach the dining room, at their age, they were no longer as young, cost them a lot of effort. Sister Salvatore, who gave out meals, and spent her whole life in the kitchen, where it was enough to turn round to reach everything she needed, or lift no more than 10 cartons to find whatever she was looking for, now says that we should buy her a pair of skates if she is to work in this kitchen. After all the suffering, God gave us a wonderful convent, and I can only tell you that it all happened exactly when things were at their worst.
In the new reality, the sisters had not only to take care of putting up new convent walls and undertake new challenges, which for the Eucharistine Sisters, amongst others, meant creating a boarding school for girls, an infirmary for the poor, as well as working with a home for single mothers. However, putting up buildings proved less difficult than rebuilding a community, weakened by untold years of communist rule.
В всичките тези години, в които ние живяхме през комунизма, нямаше възможност за никакъв контакт.
During all the years that we had lived under communism, there was no chance of establishing wider contacts, so that new sisters joined one by one. The difference between the generations is huge. Young girls who are presently in contact with our convent have done so at a time when our sisters are, I would say, reaching the twilight of their lives. Yet in spite of that, something has attracted them to follow this road. That something, or someone, written with a capital S, is in fact God Himself, who continues to build His home. I think that God has His own plans. Truly, before we are finally extinguished, there are already signs of renewal. Life goes on. I can see that it presently brings good, and I want to believe that God really is in charge of everything.
Искам да вярвам, че наистина Божията ръка движи всичко.
В момента сме 7.
For now we are 7, with 4 who have taken their final vows, whilst 3 are on their way. Amongst the 4, 2 are old, having gone through all the ordeals, prisons, and others.
Са прекарали всички тези изпитания, нали, затвори и така. Считаме, че изпитанията, през които Кармил е минал,
We know that the trials the Carmelite convent had to live through are a guarantee of its future, even though from a human point of view there are few of us, and that we have comparatively few callings. On the other hand, the callings of the young sisters who have now entered the convent are serious, so that we can dare to hope that they will carry the Carmelite flame into the future. We prayed that the Bulgarian nation would break free from the suffering so that the people could once again come closer to God, because it was quite simply unbearable. All who came to church were persecuted, called to be interrogated. I would like our nation to have more believers, for Bulgarians to be called to the Carmelite convent, for more people to pray for our nation, one that has moved a very, very long way away from the truth and the faith, and for the unification of the churches to take place as soon as possible.
Никой път не съм имала отчаяние от моето призвание.
I have never regretted my choice, never. I am happy and grateful to God for my calling, as well as grateful to my mother for consecrating me to God. I am completely fulfilled in the Carmelite convent and have never regretted entering. When I look back, I also do not regret all the suffering. I entered the convent 50 years ago. No, not 50. My God, 57 years ago. Forgive me in case I have said anything foolish.